Hello and welcome to the Controller Chronicles. In this installment, I'm going to be talking about a really awesome mod I've done. This is a stock 3-button Sega Genesis controller PCB. It is a fairly simple controller powered by a 74HC157 digital multiplexer. This design is based on older 2-button DB9 controllers that have been in use since the early 1980s. With the addition of the start and a third action button, the multiplexer is used to control voltage, both positive and negative, to interpret button presses. Thing is, I don't particularly like the Sega Genesis controller. Don't get me wrong, it's not a bad design, but this thing has always just been too big for me. I just think that the whole design is just kind of not that great for a controller. I mean, it's comfortable, it's nice to hold, but I just have always preferred Nintendo controllers. So with that in mind, I've taken an idea of a friend of mine and I've designed something else. So this you might recognize as an NES 2 or NES 101 or NES top loader dog bone controller. This is an NES controller, definitely not for the Sega, but I have modified it. So go to the end with a Sega Genesis controller cord. That's right, this is now a Sega controller that works with the Sega Genesis. So you might be wondering, how in the hell did I do this? Well, it all comes back to the 3-button Sega Genesis controller. Early revision controllers had a actual physical chip multiplexer. So what I did here was I desoldered the multiplexer and then I reconnected some of the leads that need to be going together with capacitors and whatnot. And then I went to the NES Dogbone controller and I desoldered the 4021 control chip. It's used by Nintendo, and I took that out, and so make the controller essentially brain dead. At that point, I needed to find the traces that were in the 4021 and basically convert the digital multiplexer that's in the Sega Genesis controller to this controller, so making this essentially a phantom Sega Genesis controller. So the way this works is you still have the D-pad. The D-pad is 1-to-1. The select button now functions as the Genesis A button. Start is start. The Genesis B button is now the NES B button, and the NES A button is the Genesis C button. So that means that you have A, B, and C. So you might be wondering why I did it that way, because I could have it configured any other way. I could have it, I could put start here if I wanted or whatever. The reason I did that was because a lot of games don't actually use the A button as a primary button. It's a little strange if you're considering, the NES or Super Nintendo games would always have you pressing the Y and then the B or whatever, something like that. You'd use your thumb for the two most inner buttons, and the A button over here would be the auxiliary button. Sega did it the other way around, with these two buttons being the main buttons and this one being the auxiliary buttons. So most of the time you're playing, an action game, this would be, like shoot, or this would be jump, and this would be like some sort of special move. Streets of Rage does that, for instance. So I did that because Sega games typically use the B and C buttons more often than not, including a lot of action games that I particularly like, such as Mega Man The Wily Wars. So I'm just going to demo this. I'm going to put in the Wily Wars here. I'm going to take my modified NES controller, which is really a Sega controller that's running inside of a Genesis or an NES controller. Plug that in. Let's turn on the TV and turn it on. Now, Wily Wars is a good example for this because it has a control configuration mode that you can see what the buttons do when I press them. Alright, so here we go. Turn that down a little. Alright, so let's press start. Now let's go to options. And you can see the default is shot button is the B button, which is this one right here, but let's change that to A. It's a little hard to see, so see that the buttons are changing. So let's make shot, jump, and shot, jump, and window. Alright, so all that done. Choose Mega Man 2, let's play, I know, I'm going to play Flashman stage. So I'm jumping with the A button, shooting with B. That's actually the A button, and this is start. Alright, you guys get the point, right? But now I'm going to switch to another game. Let's put in Vector Man. Pull this out. There we go. Let's play Vector Man for a minute. Yes. Skip. Almost as bad as a modern day game. Alright. Here we go. Vector Man with the Genesis controller. Essentially the controls are pretty much the same as Mega Man. You can shoot, jump, double jump. You can shoot with pressing select because that's the A button again. And you can pause. So yeah, that's this NES controller running on the Sega Genesis. But that's not where the fun stops. Because Sega likes to make everything they do cross-compatible, I can take the cords out of my Genesis here, unplug the controller, set my Genesis aside, and bring in its place the Sega Master System. Let's put this down and let's get this plugged in. So plug in S-Video, plug in composite, plug in the mono sound, I should say. Alright. And let's grab a quintessential Sega Master System game, such as Alex Kidd in Miracle World. Open this up. This cart. Into the Master System it goes. Let's take the NES controller. Let's plug that in. Turn it on. And here we go. Here's Alex Kidd in Miracle World, playing with a Nintendo controller. Now, as you can see, it runs perfectly. The D-pad is controlling the Sega Master System. You have your jump button and you have your punch button. Now, of course, this is the Sega Master System, which only has two buttons to begin with. So start and select both don't do anything because they don't share any functions. This would be the Genesis A button, and this is start. Of course, they don't exist in the Master System, so they do nothing here. No, I died. But yeah, this is just a cool little project I did. You will need quite a few things getting this to work. You'll need all the capacitors that you need. This is not just a straight conversion. You need an early revision Sega Genesis controller that has a actual physical chip digital multiplexer, and not a surface-mounted one that's, microscopic or would be super difficult to desolder and then solder to again. Again, you also need an early revision Sega or NES Model 2 controller, and not the later ones, because the earlier ones again had a bigger physical 4021 control chip rather than the surface-mounted one that came out later because of cost reductions. Oops, a fellow died. But yeah, so if you have the proper controllers and proper size controllers and the soldering skills and the components that you need, this is a fun little project that's well worth doing, because you can get a really awesome controller that works on the Sega Genesis. Whoops, shouldn't have punched that. And works on the Sega Master System, as well as everything else that uses the DP9 controller standard, such as the Commodore 64 or Atari 2600, or any number of classic consoles. So yeah, that's pretty neat. NES controller on the Sega Master System, or NES controller on the Sega Genesis, or 2600, or the Commodore, or whatever you want. Anything that uses the old DB9 standard will work with this adapter. So this is a cool thing, because it's something that can be used, very versatile. This is a very comfortable controller to hold. I think it's superior to the stock 3-button Genesis controller. It is a little bit complicated to use and not really ideal for 3-button games, ones that require you to use like all 3 action buttons simultaneously or something. An idea like you have to take your finger off of the D-pad to press the select button if you're playing Streets of Rage, for instance. But all that said, this is something that's worth doing, and it's a lot of fun. So thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you guys next time.